In the realm of mysteries, we occasionally have a sudden breakthrough, find new evidence, and come across fresh leads that shed light on the enduring enigmas. These updates lead us through the latest twists and turns and the most unsettling conundrums. Number 10. There are secret treasures buried all over the United States, and the mystery is yours to unravel. Back in 1982, Byron Preiss released a captivating and enduring real-world treasure hunt mystery book titled The Secret. He'd spent just more than a year traveling across the United States and Canada, burying small ceramic boxes no less than 2 feet underground. He then wrote poems and had a friend paint some pictures. All of these were then compiled into a book, copies were made, and they were distributed. The goal of the treasure hunt was for the reader to match the poem to a painting and produce a map of sorts. They would then have to venture out and dig up the treasure. Preiss thought that this would be an easy game, but 40 years later, he's proven to be most erroneous. Altogether, there are 12 boxes, each of which contains a key. The key can then be exchanged for a precious gem. Many have been around the country, digging up the dirt in San Francisco, Charleston, Roanoke, New Orleans, Montreal, Houston, Cleveland, Chicago, St. Augustine, and many other cities. 1 year after the books were released to the public, a group of students set out to attempt to solve the mystery. They managed to decipher the poem and create a map that led them to Grant Park in Chicago. It was here that the first of the 12 hidden casks was found. For some reason, the treasure hunt fell into obscurity for years, only to resurface again in 2004, when 2 members of the Quest for Treasure managed to figure out where another cask was hiding. That year, they dug up the Cleveland treasure. A year after that, Preiss was involved in a fatal collision and succumbed to his wounds. But still, the quest for the treasure continued. The puzzles, though, were hard and relied on the hunter's knowledge of how the area looked back in 1982. As the times began to change the construct of the cities, the secret fell into obscurity again. For years, only 2 of the 12 were found. Then, in 2019, there was another unexpected and sudden update. It was the discovery of another cask. This time, it was the one buried in Boston. The finders had tracked it down to a construction site. While the box itself had been damaged, the key was still intact, and those who found it were awarded their precious gem. Some treasure hunters, such as Cindy Hendry, obsess over the hunt. Often she lays awake at night, gripped by intrusive thoughts, trying to figure out where the next treasure may be. While she hasn't visited Montreal, Milwaukee, or New York, there is one treasure destination located nearby, St. Augustine. She believes that a nearby park may lead her to the cask that was buried more than 40 years ago. But now, all she has to do is get a digging permit. Number 9. Serving as one of the 7 wonders of the world are the pyramids of Giza, a complex of 3 major constructs that are overflowing with mystery. The constructs were built on a rocky plateau to serve as royal tombs for the pharaoh. Making up the complex are the Great Pyramids of Khufu, the Pyramid of Khafra, and the Pyramid of Menkora. Their construction and purpose have remained shrouded in mystery, and only in recent years have we been able to unravel the secrets hidden within. One question that has plagued the minds of archaeologists is how the Great Pyramids were built. It seemed almost impossible that an ancient society with limited tools would be able to create such immense buildings. It would have taken hundreds of years for them to haul such massive blocks from the canyons. While the exact construction still remains unclear, recently scientists have unearthed a few clues that may begin to explain how it all came together. In recent years, articles relating to the newfound evidence have begun to appear across various platforms. The articles spoke of various clues, including a nearby quarry from which the Egyptians would have gotten their blocks, and the discovery of purposefully built waterways. It was concluded that the blocks were transported down the Nile River, and later through those waterways, allowing the blocks to end up at the site of the pyramids. The revelations marked a new era for archaeologists as they continued to delve into the mysteries of the secret-laden pyramid complex. But as archaeologists continue to poke around in the pyramids, hoping to uncover more clues to solve existing questions, they occasionally unearth new mysteries, ultimately challenging everything they know about their discoveries. One such mystery refers to the sides of the Great Pyramid, which seem to align with the cardinal points of the compass. Some even speculate that the three great megaliths are aligned to celestial bodies. As recently as 2017, another layer would be added to the pyramid enigma, which may help scientists figure out the true purpose of these constructs. The revelation came through the new project that would deploy a scanning method, resulting in the discovery of a void. A large void was found beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza, which stretched 100 feet in length. Using advanced imaging techniques known as muon radiography, over 30 scientists working on the same project independently discovered a previously unknown void. The immediate search began following this find as questions abound, wondering what it was and why it was there. The discovery only further added to the mystery of the Great Pyramids, but Egyptologists were able to make a quick deduction. After further assessing the discovery, it was found that the void may have simply been used as a stress-relieving device for the Grand Gallery. Number 8. The Golden Apple Tale is a long-running unsolved treasure hunt that stemmed from the 1982 publication by Cam Kaskin, a pseudonym for a mystery author who appropriately made his publication through Fantasy Press. While the book is no longer in print, PDF versions are still available as the real-life treasure hunt continues. The pages are packed with puzzles, codes, clues, anagrams, play on words, computations, and riddles, some of which are misspelled, but whether this was intentional or not is unknown. Deciphering these clues may lead the solver to a hidden treasure, an 18-karat golden apple necklace. The clues and misdirections begin instantly on the very cover with the name of the author. Some have suggested that the prize and story itself may be connected to apples, an aspect that sends the treasure hunters down a rabbit hole, distracting them from the task at hand. Since it was published, the book and the hunt would fall into obscurity until 2000, when it saw a resurgence. Many sleuths began trying to solve the clues and puzzles, which ultimately fueled an internet mystery. Online platforms began to see the formation of various communities dedicated to figuring out the Golden Apple Tale. You would think that with so many communities having a go at solving the clues, the mystery would be put to rest by now, but after 40 years, it persists. While a few of the riddles and puzzles were deciphered, several questions remain, including who Cam Kaskin is, whether there are still more copies of the book, and where the treasure is. Enthusiasts began to speculate that the writer may have been Jeff Raskin, who worked for Apple. This would explain the necklace's unique pendant and the name of the hunt. Raskin was also one of the pioneers of the Macintosh project. Some sleuths have observed the writings of Raskin and Cam, deducing that they're incredibly similar. Then, just a few years ago, there came an unearthing. Cam's identity was finally discovered by a group of armchair treasure hunters. Since there was no way of contacting the man remotely, the group resorted to just showing up at his door. The solvers had taken a video, but the elusive author's face cannot be seen. He preferred to remain anonymous and give the rest of the enthusiasts a chance to solve the puzzle too. He confirmed that the prize was still exactly where he had left it all those years ago, somewhere near Grand Rapids, Michigan. He also confirmed that he still had a box of the original books that he planned to redistribute. This revelation confirmed the identity of the author and the existence of the copies, and now only the Golden Apple Tale treasure remains. Number 7. Ettore Majorana was among the brilliant minds who left devastation and mystery in his wake. He was an Italian theoretical physicist and the disciple of the Nobel Prize winner of the Physics Prize, Enrico Fermi. Fermi considered him to be a genius. Born in 1906, Majorana was already viewed as visibly gifted and highly intelligent. In his lifetime, the physicist would be the author of 9 papers that dealt with complex subjects such as anatomic spectroscopy. Despite having the Majorana equation and the Majorana-Fermion named after him, he considered his own work to be unremarkable. In 1933, at the age of 27 years old, he fell into poor health and began to withdraw from his family. Despite having a loving relationship with his mother, he declined to accompany her on a summer holiday, which they usually went on together. Between 1933 and 1936, Majorana stopped publishing scientific papers, releasing his last publication a year later. At the age of 32, he became a professor of theoretical physics at the University of Naples. It would be this same year that an enduring mystery would begin. It was the disappearance of Ettore Majorana. It was that year that Italy was submerged in a time of turbulent political confrontation, which some believed may have played a role in the missing man's decision. At some point that year, Majorana had withdrawn all of his money from his bank account. He then made a trip from Naples to Palermo. On the 25th of March, he would purchase a boat ticket to return to Naples. That day, he also wrote a note to the director of Naples Physics Institute. The note was alarming and spoke of an unavoidable decision. What that decision was can only be guessed at. It would be that day that Majorana enigmatically disappeared, never to be heard from again. Various theories regarding his disappearance abound. One writer became convinced that he made the decision to vanish after foreseeing the development of nuclear forces that would lead to great tragedies, such as those that would destroy Hiroshima. The newspapers began to announce the disappearance of the great physicist. Question marks littered the pages, and hope of ever figuring out what happened to him began to dwindle. The mystery of Majorana sounds like one of those mysteries that are just never meant to be solved. For years, it was thought that the case would be another event that haunted us through the times, just like Amelia Earhart in the Roanoke colony. Much to our surprise, this was not the case. It took decades before any revelation would be made, but finally in 2011, the case was reopened. It had been 79 years since the physicist vanished without a trace when the Italian media reported a sudden break in the case. A witness came forward, claiming to have met the missing man back in 1955, and the witness even provided a picture to prove it. The article went on to detail the allegations made by the witness. He claimed that the man he had met was shy, reserved, and referred to himself as Mr. Beanie. He was of average height, and his hair was now white and wavy with age. It was said that the two had met in Venezuela after a friend introduced them. The witness claimed that Majorana never wanted to be photographed and would regularly vanish for days at a time. It was only through blackmail that the witness was able to snap a picture of the man. The article then claims that this sole image was compared against other pictures of Majorana and of his father, only to conclude that the image and claim appeared to be credible. But still, his whereabouts, up until his passing, remained unknown. After another 4 years of investigating the mystery, there was finally confirmation. Researchers concluded that Majorana was still alive and in Venezuela between 1955 and 1959. Although there's no grave marking his passing, it's thought that he lived out the remainder of his life there. Adding to this revelation was the discovery of a postcard found in Mr. Beanie's car. It was written by the missing man's uncle, ultimately confirming that Beanie was Majorana. Number 6. Over the years, researchers, scientists, and archaeologists have roamed around the shadows of history, attempting to refine techniques that could resurrect ancient DNA and finally put to rest some age-old mysteries. But after a series of failures, they would finally refine their methods, allowing them to coax out the DNA from teeth, bones, and other remnants. But when they applied the same techniques to ancient tools, jewelry, and ornaments, their efforts would falter. The items were just too fragile, ultimately leaving their secrets buried with them. Despite the setbacks, though, many professionals continued to experiment as they attempted to unravel the unknown past. In the interim, a 2019 visit to the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology prompted yet another mystery. An archaeologist had made a discovery in the icy expanse of Siberia. He had unearthed it in a Denisova cave, a place steeped in legends of Neanderthals and Denisovans. But the artifact had been wrapped in a plastic bag, forcing the experts to presume that it was already contaminated and therefore useless. But this wasn't the case. As the wraps were removed, a strange item sat in its center. It was a Paleolithic tooth pendant of unknown origins. It had a hole drilled into it, whispering the idea that it was once worn by an ancient race, possibly a necklace, a bracelet, or even a headpiece. The archaeologists who found it had worn protective overalls to avoid contamination, and the pendant itself was still coated in dirt. There was still one problem. The technique to extract DNA was faulty, so the item was forced to linger at the institution, leaving many historians wondering about its life. Questions about who wore it, who made it, and what its actual purpose was trotted on. The years passed by as experts continued their experimental methods, hoping that they would at some point have a breakthrough. Luckily for them, that breakthrough came in 2023, when they were finally able to hone the skill of DNA extraction. They recovered the stored item and began their testing. At first, they would discover the tooth belonged to a 20,000-year-old elk, but that was just the beginning of what they would find. Stored in the porous material was a questionable amount of human DNA. The sheer amount of samples found hinted at the idea that it had been worn often, perhaps even for the duration of the wearer's life. The samples allowed experts to track down who the wearer was. Astonishingly, they discovered that the owner of the pendant was a woman from the Stone Age who was linked to a society of hunter-gatherers. The group had once roamed the east of Siberia, near Lake Baikal. The revelation ultimately allowed researchers to peel back the layers of history, allowing them to unearth the occupancy of early America. The tooth pendant was reminiscent of a frostbitten Siberia that was echoed by the chants of an ancient North Eurasian culture. It remains uncertain, though, if the woman had made the object or if she was merely the wearer. Number 2. It was 1888 when a heinous, unprovoked homicidal spree swept across the Whitechapel district of London's East End. Women were the main target, with dozens between 1888 and 1892 being speculatively attributed to one man, Jack the Ripper. The pseudonym sends chills down the spines of anyone who hears it, since it's the most famous unsolved mystery of English crime. The Ripper had committed some gruesome acts, creating precise lacerations across his victims' throats, mutilation that indicated that he had some knowledge of human anatomy. But the culprit was never identified. The infamous Whitechapel homicides remained nothing more than a mystery. Stories were written about them, movies were made, and sleuths continued the works of the original detectives. But still, there was no answer to the enduring question: who was Jack the Ripper? The era was filled with brutality, but not as violent as the crimes of the Ripper. The slayings hinted at the mind of a more sociopathic individual, a hateful person that the citizens couldn't comprehend. As the story continued to be told through the times, the likelihood of it ever being solved began to dwindle. Or so we thought. Confusion began to surmount when British detective Trevor Marriott was denied access to uncensored documents in 2011. And in 2014, amateur sleuth Russell Edwards revealed that he had determined the identity of the Ripper, with DNA evidence obtained from a shawl, pointing the finger at a Polish man named Aaron Kosminski. Kosminski was already among the suspects before this, but no definitive proof could tie him to the slayings. Despite asserting that he had figured out the maniac's identity, though, this idea wasn't accepted. That was until 2019, when two biochemists took a look at the same DNA that stained the clothing of one of the victims. The biochemists found that it was a likely match. Edwards had acquired the shawl back in 2007, but only made the revelation after receiving a sample from Kosminski's oldest brother's great-great-granddaughter. Her DNA matched what was discovered on the shawl, leading to a plausible revelation. Number 4. Thousands of disappearances are documented each year. In just the United States alone, 600,000 people disappear yearly, 460,000 of which are children. While a high percentage of these cases are solved, an ominous fragment remains a mystery. With so many people still not being found, various questions are raised. With advancements in technology, security cameras, ring cameras, dash cams, and a growing population of potential witnesses, it's hard to believe that so many disappearances still go unsolved. Such was the case with Anisha Catherine Murnane. Anisha was born in April of 1981 in Homer, Alaska, to Timothy and Sarah. She would later pursue a career in teaching and acquire her master's degree in education, after which she began working as a preschool teacher. Anisha would secure various positions in several schools, including in Honduras, Australia, and Seattle. She was living in Alaska again in 2019 after experiencing some medical issues and would start taking medication for bipolar disorder. That year, she would also be living in a supported housing facility near Main Street and Lee Street in Homer. It was here that she showed signs of significant improvement and was in stable condition. But by the end of that year, Anisha's life was bound for a twisted turn. On the 17th of October, she was spotted on the security camera, leaving the home at the Main Street Supportive Living Facility. It's believed that she was headed to her 1 p.m. appointment at SVT Health and Wellness Clinic, located a mile away on Pioneer Avenue and East End Road. She didn't have a car at the time and was presumed to have been on foot, but Anisha would never make it to her appointment, and she was never seen again. A few days later, an employee of the housing facility grew concerned when the 38-year-old failed to show up, and she was subsequently reported missing. An investigation was launched, and tracking dogs were brought in. They led officers to Pioneer Avenue and stopped in front of the Kachemak Bay campus. This indicated that Anisha was likely picked up, but relatives say that she never would have gotten into a vehicle with a stranger. Since her disappearance, there's been no activity on her phone, bank account, or social media. She didn't use her airline tickets for her plane trips to Oregon and Mexico, and she was never heard from again. The case grew cold, and the mystery of Anisha Murnane continued. It wasn't until just a few years ago that the first break in the case would be made. On the 14th of April, 2022, authorities received a tip from an anonymous tipster. They detailed information about Anisha and her disappearance and named 32-year-old Kirby Fellini Calderwood as the person of interest. But in 2019, Calderwood was working at Main Street Housing, the same facility that Anisha was affiliated with. It was here that the two met and even ate together. Calderwood had already been placed under suspicion a year prior, but this was never made public. In May of 2022, the police acquired search warrants for the suspect's home and car located on Quincy Avenue. Here, they discovered large, red-stained sharpened blades and a machete. Authorities also found a Timex watch belonging to a woman, which matched the description given by Anisha's parents. Authorities then interviewed Calderwood's third wife, who admitted to being the tipster. It was alleged that the man had confessed his wrongdoings to his wife at the time. According to her, he'd gone driving around in search of a victim when he happened across the unsuspecting Anisha and offered her a ride. Instead of taking her to the intended destination, Calderwood took the victim to an unoccupied home belonging to his then-girlfriend. Here, he would allegedly take her life and dispose of her body in a dumpster. Calderwood was arrested and considered the main suspect in the disappearance of the woman and was charged with homicide. But Anisha Murnane's body remains missing. Number 3. Back in 2013, law enforcement, family, and friends were left scratching their heads when Robert Hoagland mysteriously disappeared. Many wondered if he'd simply walked away voluntarily or if something sinister was at play. Posters of the missing man began filling news feeds and lampposts. The pages explained that Robert had vanished from his home in Sandy Hook, Newtown, Connecticut. He was described as being 50 years old, standing 6 feet tall, and weighing around 175 pounds. According to police, Robert was last seen at a bagel shop and then at a gas station, where he purchased a map of the eastern United States. He was last seen on a summer's Sunday in July of that year. Upon his disappearance, he would leave behind all of his personal belongings, including his wallet, cell phone, blood pressure medication, cash, car keys, and passport. Shortly before he vanished, though, Robert had been engaged in a verbal confrontation in Bridgeport. The argument was connected to 2 laptop computers associated with his son, who was serving jail time for issues relating to narcotics. It was this event that led law enforcement to consider the possibility of foul play. Despite search efforts and turning to the community for help, Robert Hoagland remained missing. The years passed by, and the appeal for information regarding the missing man faded from view. The mystery would then find itself in 2022 in Thompson, New York, at the residence of a man named David. It was the 5th of December, 2022, when David was readying himself for work. He hadn't laid eyes on his friend and roommate, Richard King, that morning. In fact, he hadn't seen his friend in almost a decade since Friday. David had met Richard after he put an ad out seeking a roommate. His marriage had recently ended, and he needed someone to split the rent with. Richard responded to the ad and soon moved in. The two became the best of friends almost instantly, and had been for over 9 years. At the time he moved in with David, Richard was already working for Empire Inspections and Appraisals in the Hudson Valley. As David was leaving that morning, thinking about not having seen his roommate, he found something even more alarming. It was his friend's car, still parked in the garage. It was unusual, since by that time Richard would already be off to work. Thinking that the man had simply taken the day off, he continued on his trip into the city. Later, though, he decided to review the security camera footage that showed Richard's Friday night return. It revealed something alarming. The man had stumbled into the house, clutching his back in agony, and disappeared into his room. Later that day, David sent someone to check on the roommate, but when the door went unanswered, he was forced to speed off home. He entered Richard's bedroom, who was laying on his bed, hands crossed over his chest and not breathing. Paramedics arrived at the scene, but it was no use. Richard was gone. As police began poking around for any form of identification for the deceased, they came up empty-handed. But they would discover mail addressed to someone else, someone named Robert Hoagland. David told investigators that Richard had mentioned the week before that he would be receiving mail under an alternative name, but never gave an explanation for it. But when they typed that name into Google, they discovered multiple articles about the missing man from the same man. Detectives then took a look at the missing person posters, and they looked back at the deceased Richard King. They were the same person. Number 2. It's an old mystery, a tragedy on pause, a disappearance that has marred history for decades and intrigued sleuths of all professions. The case of Amelia Earhart still haunts us through the times as we attempt to piece together what happened to her, wonder where she is, and how she vanished without a trace. Earhart is among the most prominent figures in aviation. Her story has inspired books, movies, and plays. Despite facing various challenges, she was able to set many records in aviation, including being the first female pilot to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. But Earhart had another destiny, to become a long-standing mystery. The fateful day came on the 2nd of July in 1937, when she rose to the sky with the intention of flying around the world. Earhart was accompanied by her navigator, Fred Noonan, who in some articles had been described as unreliable. That day, during the flight, radio contact was lost with Old Bessie, the Firehorse, a Lockheed Vega aircraft. A massive search effort was later launched, but it was unsuccessful. This led to the conclusion that Earhart and Noonan had crashed into the ocean. Following this event, various theories came into play. Some even suggested that they landed on a remote island and were taken as prisoners of war. It was believed that the plane may have run out of fuel and crashed near Holland Island, but this was never able to be confirmed. It was also thought that they suffered radio transmission issues, preventing them from locating the island and leading the plane to land elsewhere, lost forever. The first revelation in the case came in 1991 when a piece of metal panel was discovered. It was theorized that it could have been from a wrecked plane, but no one was able to confirm this idea. That was until 2024, when researchers from Penn State University's Radiation Science and Engineering reanalyzed the artifact. By making use of advanced imaging techniques of the panel that was found on the island of Niku, hidden letters and numbers became visible. This discovery would allow researchers to confirm if the panel did come from Old Bessie. This wasn't the only revelation that had been made in the case of Amelia Earhart. Also in 2024, an independent company set out in an underwater vehicle after it spotted what appeared to be a submerged aircraft. The alleged craft was resting 100 miles from Holland Island, 16,000 feet below the surface. Sonar images reveal a plane-shaped object near the island where Earhart intended to refuel. The object's shape on the sonar images closely resembled the Lockheed Electra in both size and tail shape. After a closer look at the images, though, the company redirected their claims, stating that they'd met a dead end. Their target appeared to be nothing more than a rock formation that seemingly fit the exact size and shape of the missing craft. And while this sounded like a disappointment, further research is still needed to confirm or deny the claims. Number 1. A pencil sketch, accompanied by the word "wanted," littered the streets of the San Francisco Bay Area. It was a detailed drawing of a homicidal maniac that prompted the onslaught of at least 5 individuals, but may be responsible for many more. Instead of trying to hide in the shadows, he taunted investigators with cryptic messages, only some of which have been solved. Proclaiming himself the Zodiac, the unknown man would sign each cipher with a crosshair symbol. As the FBI and other authorities attempted to decipher the messages, the Zodiac continued his slaying spree. In 1969, only one of the messages had been deciphered, but the bodies continued to accumulate. In December of 2020, the first revelation in years of the homicidal mystery was made. The 340-character cipher, known as Z340, was solved by amateur codebreakers. The message spoke of the afterlife and being in paradise after passing away. Unfortunately, it led to no clues in identifying the man behind the slayings. While the identity of the Zodiac remains unknown, over the years, many possible suspects have fallen into the scope of not only authorities, but also amateur sleuths. It's presumed that at least one of the 4 ciphers should hold the identity of the maniac, but as they lie unsolved, we at least need to try to identify them. This is precisely what the nonprofit organization Casebreakers has been trying to do. The group is made up of former police officers, FBI agents, and forensic analysts. This organization is responsible for delving into the lives of the purported suspects as they attempt to prove or disprove the claims. One such suspect is Arthur Lee Allen, who was the only suspect who'd been officially named by the police. Allen, a former elementary school teacher, raised suspicions when it was discovered that he'd been within close proximity to the first of the slayings. Yet Allen shares limited similarities to the witness sketch. Ross Sullivan, on the other hand, was a more plausible character. Given the shape of his glasses and the resemblance to the sketch, he would also be considered a suspect. Despite the uncanny resemblance, though, no further evidence ever tied him to the crime. Louis Joseph Myers was also connected to the crimes after a friend, Randy Kinney, alleged that Myers confessed to the homicides while he was succumbing to cirrhosis in 2001. Again, there was no concrete evidence, aside from the absence of ciphers that came at a time when Myers served in the military. The Casebreakers wouldn't give up, despite being met with another wall. What they really needed was DNA, and in 2021, they got just what they asked for. It was certainly a shock, even for them, that after so many years, DNA evidence would randomly pop up. Except it wasn't all that random. Casebreakers had been looking into a secretly named suspect listed by the FBI. Claims against this individual had gone uninvestigated by authorities, who began to suspect him back in 2016. Law enforcement had missed the opportunity to arrest or question the man since he passed away in 2018. The new discovery pointed the finger at Gary Francis Post, a United States Air Force veteran. Oddly, the headquarters has a safely secured sample of partial DNA linked to Post, but the organization needed more. Thomas J. Colbert, who was part of Casebreakers, managed to collect DNA from a 30-year hiking mat, which Post once owned. This, accompanied by samples from blood relatives and the suspect's firearm collection, may have sent them on the path to putting an enduring mystery to rest. A team of more than 40 former officials cited evidence for the bold claim, including forensic evidence from Post's darkroom that's consistent with some of the coded notes written by the Zodiac. It also appeared that he had a history of violence, which is what landed him on the database back in 2016, when he was arrested for assaulting his wife. Neighbors also expressed suspicions about the character, wondering if there was something sinister at play. Another neighbor who lived directly next door remembers Post as cruel and callous. The common-law wife of Post's son also claims that he would often harass and intimidate her. Various aspects of Post's life are reminiscent of the Zodiac's spree, including footprints of a military-style boot that were coincidentally the same size as the veteran's. These prints would be found at 3 of the homicide scenes. The suspects also share a resemblance with the Zodiac pencil sketch, leaving many wondering. Post appeared to have a unique connection to a 6th homicide too, only allowing Casebreakers to bolster their claim. Despite these assertions, Post was never charged during his lifetime, and while there's no concrete proof that confirms he was the Zodiac, the newfound evidence is a revelation that cannot be ignored. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.